Welcome to the Misophonia podcast. This is episode 223. My name's Adil Ahmad, and I have misophonia. This week I'm talking to Michael, a 7-year-old retired software engineer who experienced a remarkable breakthrough with his lifelong misophonia. After hearing episode 218 with Sarah Barrick about memory reconsolidation and following a painful breakup that motivated him to seek help, Michael worked with a therapist using EMDR and memory reconsolidation. Through this process, he uncovered a traumatic childhood memory involving his father that he had completely blocked out and realized his triggers were connected to his father's behaviors. By retrieving and reconsolidating these memories with positive replacements, Michael reports profound relief from his symptoms. He now attends church and leads support groups without the anxiety that controlled his entire life, well, at least for the last 60 years. After the show, let me know what you think. You can reach out to me by email at hello@misophoniapodcast.com or hit me up on Instagram or Facebook at Misophonia Podcast. By the way, please head over and leave a quick rating wherever you listen to the show. It really helps drive us up in those algorithms. And importantly, if you want to come on the podcast, please just go to misophoniapodcast.com and click the Be a Guest link at the top. All right, now here's my conversation with Michael. Michael, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we were just saying, like we've kind of talked a bit over the years via email, but actually, first of all, do you want to just tell us a little bit about where you're located, kind of maybe what you do? Or
I'm in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, which is a northern suburb of Philadelphia. I'm a retired software engineer, so I think we may have that in common.
Yeah, I'm not retired, but hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've had misophonia most of my life. I'm 70 years old, and I've had it for at least, I think, 60 years.
Wait, did you? Well, when did you find out it had a name?
It's funny. My sister knew I had this crazy reaction to sounds. So she was looking around Facebook a few years ago and found that it had a name, and she sent it to me. And I said, other people actually have this? I thought this was something that just was my craziness. And that's, in fact, when I saw your podcast, I was just doing searches, internet searches, and your podcast showed up. So relatively recent, probably within the past 4 or 5 years, I would say.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That is pretty recent. And that's interesting because, there are a lot of engineers who have misophonia. It's just interesting as someone who's been in the field for so long that, well, you probably rubbed shoulders with other people who had it. Maybe they also didn't know what it was.
Yes, I have run into other people, and they didn't know it had a name either. So I'd say, "Do you know this thing has a name?" And they were just surprised as I was.
Yeah. Well, do you want to go back, I guess, back to early? Kind of tell us a little bit about, I don't know, where you grew up, what your family was like. You had one sister, it sounds like.
A brother and a sister.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a suburb of New York City, and I would call it a dysfunctional kind of family. And I found out later, when we get to that there were some traumatic events in that family that I believe, and I'm not an expert in the area, but I believe led directly to my misophonia.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's if you've heard the podcast a lot, you know that there's a lot of things from our childhood that could kind of make us hypervigilant. And so I'm always interested in hearing about that. I guess, yeah. So do you want to tell us kind of maybe when you first start to have sensitivities to sounds, maybe some of your first memories of experiencing misophonia?
So I've always been sensitive to what I would call sloppy eating habits. Slurping, burping. Those are the two on the top of the list. But then that kind of extended into other areas, like gum snapping would get to me. One of my first recollections of being in the fight or flight area was during a college course where the girl sitting right behind me was snapping her gum, and I felt paralyzed. I remember feeling like I couldn't hear a word the professor was saying, and that was one of the first times I remember. In that case, thank God I've never fought anybody over this, but I've had the flight reaction a lot, and I learned there that I'm probably better off sitting like in a corner somewhere, and especially toward the back, because then I don't have to worry about someone behind me making the sound, and
Yeah.
that extended throughout my entire life. And I'll talk about how this. I had a recent change, and
Hmm.
how that's changed how I feel about where I need to sit, but mostly reacting to the sloppy sounds. I'm very aware of when people are talking loud.
Mm.
Like I could be in a room with 100 people, and if one person's talking loud, it starts getting to me. Well, it did get to me.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, so like I said, it came and it went, but I feel more sensitive, and I don't know why. And sometimes in my life, I felt more sensitive than other times, um, but it's always been there as long as I can remember.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and do you know what was kind of happening, I guess, in your home life around the time, maybe just before you start to notice misophonia? Do you remember what age kind of you were?
So, if you don't mind, I'll tell you how I got to that point. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
my brother's a therapist, and several years ago, I told him about this, and he had never heard of it. And I told him, what I learned basically from listening to your podcast, that a lot of times these kind of things are brought about by traumatic events. And he said to me, you should really do some EMDR, and maybe that'll help you recall these events. And I had done EMDR before. I had a bad traffic accident, and I'd
Mm.
wake up, in cold sweats, seeing the car just before it hit me, and I did EMDR, and it was very helpful for that. So I went back and did EMDR again, and it wasn't the first time we did it, but over time we did it enough times that I did have one very vivid memory that I had totally forgotten about until that point. And I must have been, I guess, 10 years old, and I walked into my house, dysfunctional house. I walked around the corner, and I saw my father hit my mother with a 2x4. Hit her so hard that it put her into the hospital. Now, I'm the only one that saw this, but my brother and sister do remember that she was in the hospital. So we put two plus two together, and we realized what happened there. And I guess it was such a traumatic event that my body just stored it away somewhere, never to be found again. Now, interestingly enough, my father had all of these sloppy eating habits. So I don't think it's an accident that he hit her, and then all of a sudden my young brain thought, okay, he's a bad guy, so I guess what he does is bad, and that led. I remember, after the EMDR event, that right after this happened, I started reacting to my father slurping and burping. So there was a direct correlation there for me. But the interesting thing is, this happened again, probably got 5 or 6 years ago. Knowing what the event was didn't help me at all. All I knew was, okay, this happened, but I still had the misophonia. It wouldn't go away until I
Well,
was.
it was in you for so long
It
that
was. It
it's
was
not going to go
part of me.
overnight, I would think.
I got to
Yeah.
the point where I just accepted. I'm just this
Hmm.
weird person, and people think I'm crazy. People think I'm being over dramatic. But what changed that was your podcast 218, where you had Sarah Barrick on, and I think Sarah and I
Hmm.
spoke, um, and that was life changing. That led to the next phase. I don't know if you're ready to go to the next phase, but
Yeah, I like to jump around, so let's do it.
okay. So what got me to this point? was I was in a 2-year relationship with this person that I was really in love with. She knew that I had this issue, and it came up, and it became a point of contention between the two of us. And about 6 months ago, she used the words, "I've had it. I can't take it anymore," and she ended the relationship. Now, there were other aspects to misophonia that I learned through therapy. So I went to therapy after the relationship blew up, and I realized that I was becoming a very judgmental person. For example, if someone was slurping, I would immediately go into judgment mode. Oh, how could they slurp? How could they be such a person? And I didn't even know I was doing this. It took my ex-girlfriend partner to point this out to me. So I've been doing a lot of work with that with my therapist. And then I was avoiding certain things like travel, because although I like to travel, traveling's the worst because people are always making noises. You're on an airplane, the guy sitting next to you is chewing gum, and it makes it very difficult and uncomfortable. And that was an issue too. So in therapy, my therapist, again, she didn't know anything about misophonia. She had me do these SUDS tests. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Stands for subjective units of distress. And you rate from 0 to 10 what your level of pain is. And she had me doing this exposure therapy. And I know there's mixed reviews on whether that helps with misophonia. So I would go on YouTube and find people slurping soup, find people talking loud, all the triggers. And with SUDS, what you do is you write down how you felt before, during, and after. And pretty consistently, my numbers were up in the 8s and 9s and in the very uncomfortable
Makes sense.
And doing this, I felt a little bit better, but I didn't feel like I was being cured at any point in time. So again, going to my therapist and thinking, I need to deal with this because it's affecting my life and my relation. I lost this person that I was really in love with because of this. So I need to do something. I pointed out to her that I heard Sarah Barrick and this whole memory reconsolidation theory. And it made sense to me because, and look, I'm by no means an expert about this, and being a software engineer, it seemed logical to me.
Okay, yes, we're software engineers. We can break this.
So that it seemed logical that your body stores this terrible memories in your primitive brain, by the way, which is responsible for fight or flight, and that every time the trigger happens, you go back to whatever your beliefs are. Like for me, the beliefs about my father hitting my mother is I'm unsafe. My mother's unsafe. And right away, being unsafe goes straight to fight or flight. There was another incident right after the 2x4 incident where my parents were arguing and their room was right above mine. And I pictured, this is after, I had this, my whole body turning into an ear and listening and thinking, I need to protect my mother. And I'd run up the stairs and ask them to stop doing it. So I went to my therapist and I said, look, can you learn how to do memory reconsolidation? Because according to Sarah Barrick, it's life-changing. And to her credit, she went and did a whole bunch of research on it. She listened to your podcast. She listened to Sarah. Sarah's got some good stuff. And there are other folks on YouTube, by the way, that talk about memory consolidation. I talked to my brother. He said, yeah, sounds like a great idea. So we kind of learned how to do it together because the first few times we tried it, it was a little helpful, but I didn't have what I would call a breakthrough until we got it right. And then it was life-changing. So we were going back and forth between the ear, feeling like the ear, and the 2x4 incident. Finally, she got the formula right. And I think the big difference is, first she had me relax, just sit there, breathe and relax and close my eyes. But then the whole retrieving the memory was so important. And as an engineer, my metaphor would be, retrieving a file from a disk, from non-volatile memory where, it's there. And no matter what, it's going to be there, persistent. But in order to work on it, you have to retrieve it. So that was an active process of what we did. So we retrieved that memory. And then I started having visions. And I'm not a dramatic person at all. I'm a very logical engineering process person. But I started having intense visions. And for that one, for the ear, it was have this ear getting pulled out of this cage and then just sitting in front of me. And then she would ask me questions like, well, what do you associate with that? And to me, that was what I associated with it was this dysfunctional type of communication that I was experiencing with my parents. They'd be screaming at each other. And then I had this belief that all communication is dysfunctional because of that. And then, working through the whole process, we replaced that memory with another memory, which is me just communicating with somebody in a very honest and special way. And then we had to take the ear memory and somehow make it feel good about being removed and just being integrated with the rest of my memories. And that took some time, and she walked me through that process. And when that was done, I almost felt like my mind was a blank sheet of paper, that something had just shifted inside of me. And it took a whole session. That was an hour session doing that. The next week we did the 2x4. We went back.
Wow.
2x4.
Yeah.
And same process. This time I saw a vision of a brain coming out of this cage. Didn't want to come out. It was tied in with a bunch of strings. By the way, after this happened, I went on to AI and I had them draw some pictures of me. I have images of this. If you'd like, I can share them. So I pulled the brain out and it was trembling in front of me. Again, I'm not a dramatic person. I'm an engineer. So for me to have these memories, it was really special. And it took a while for me to calm it down. I also had a vision of myself as a young boy calming him down. And again, through the same process, what I replaced it with is shortly after this incident, my mother was in the hospital. I visited her and we bonded. We had such a good kind of normal time. So I replaced that memory with the bad memory, the 2x4 memory, with being with my mom. And then it took the rest of the session again to take that memory and integrate it in with the rest of my memories, assuring it that, this was something horrible that happened to me, but it's okay for it to be just part of every other memory that I had, that it didn't need to control my life. I got the same kind of blank sheet of paper, and here's my cat.
It's okay. Yeah.
So it took one more session. Both of us decided that there's no need for this cage anymore, that we needed to get rid of the cage. So we pulled both the memories out of the cage, me having conversation, and then me with my mother, and pulled it into a really beautiful scene in a field with mountains in the background. And that was the last session we had with the reconsolidation. Now, since then, Kat just jumped in case you see it in front of the screen. Since then, I've had some incredible experiences. So I'll tell you the latest one. Yesterday in church. So I'm a church goer, and for people with misophonia, church is the worst place because it's quiet. And all you need is somebody sniffling, 3 or 4 pews away from you, and you've lost your concentration. So one of the things I don't think I've shared yet is that I found that taking the THC gummies very helpful, because it kind of numbs your senses. So I would take like half of a gummy, which is a lot. I mean, enough that you're impaired, that you can't drive, but it helped me get through the service. And I would wear the Widex hearing aids because they had the little Zen thing going on, and that helped. Well, this past Sunday, I sat in church with nothing. No gummies, no hearing aids, and I was fine. The interesting thing is, I think because my body has reacted to these sounds for so many years, going back to the computer metaphor, I still hear the trigger, and I can kind of feel it trying to access the file. And there's nothing for it to access. Now, I don't get a memory violation or what you would get in the real world, but what I've learned to do is replace that with that final picture, the two replacement memories in that beautiful setting. And although the trigger still does something, it doesn't bring me to fight or flight. It brings me to a totally different place now. So the interesting thing is, if I go back to SUDS, remember SUDS you have before, during, and after.
Yeah.
Just the anticipation of something possibly affecting me. Like at church, I start with a 2, which is a really low number for me. But then I end up with zeros because there's no effect anymore.
Yeah.
So I can't recommend it enough. Sarah is, and I know she didn't invent this. She talked about some other people, but I think she may be the first one that applied it to misophonia.
Yeah.
It works. It absolutely works.
So this is amazing, and I'm really happy for you, because like I said, we've talked for a number of years on various things. I'm glad that I'm glad this has worked out, and it sounds amazing. Tactically, do you want just people who are obviously interested in kind of like learning a bit more about what the process was like how long did it all take? Like, it sounds like it was EMDR that was actually what brought up the initial memories, and then you worked with the memory reconsolidation and replacing the memories
for me
later. Yeah,
I'm no expert in the field. The reason I did EMDR is, like I said, my brother is a therapist, and when he heard the word trauma, he immediately said, "You need to try EMDR," and that really was the gateway. I had no recollection of the 2x4 incident until the EMDR. And then I still was doubting myself until I talked to my siblings, and they both said, well, that's about the same time she went to the hospital. And
did you remember the hospital part though? Do you remember her being
the hospital part? I remembered. And where he hit her in the leg, that was the reason why she went to the hospital, because she had this blood clot in her leg. Well, how do you get that? Well, if somebody hits you with a 2x4, you're going to get a blood clot.
Yeah.
So the EMDR brought out the traumatic event. I don't think I ever would have remembered it without. Now, the ear, I did remember without the EMDR, but that wasn't as intense. The ear kind of like to me, the ear was just a symptom of the EMDR. And during the process, the one thing my therapist did a really good job of is when we were thinking of the traumatic event, she would ask me specific questions like, what kind of beliefs do you have because of this? And with the 2x4, it was, I'm not safe. I'm not safe in this house. And as a little child, not being safe in your own home, I don't know if it can get more traumatic, especially from your father. And then the second one, the communication part. Look, I have a ways to go when it comes to communication, but just knowing that there was an event in my life that caused me to think that there was no such thing as real, honest, healthy communication, that all communication was dysfunctional, and that eventually it would lead to bad things. In my most recent case, this breakup that I had. And just working on those two things alone, I mean, without even addressing the misophonia, was just, again, life-changing. But having someone that knows the process, knows what questions to ask, and walks you through it very patiently. And I got to give my therapist a lot of credit for she spent a month doing research.
That's amazing. I would love to talk to her too, because I think we need to get more. Yeah, we need to get more therapists to have that kind of curiosity and willingness to learn.
Oh, unbelievable! She even told me that she thinks this can help her with all sorts of trauma, not just phonia. If you want, I can send you her info when I
Yeah,
send.
let's talk offline. Yeah, let's talk offline about that.
Okay. Yeah, I think you find the pictures fascinating. I mean, I don't know what we did before AI, but
Yeah.
trying to draw a picture of a brain coming out of a cage with strings, AI just did an amazing job with it. So yeah, there's no word I can use other than miraculous. I haven't even told my kids about this because this happened just so recently.
Yeah, could you talk about So I wanna. There's so many ways I can go. So one thing. Well, actually, yeah. But let's talk about your kids in a little bit because I'd love to hear about it, kind of like how it was for you to be a dad because especially after not knowing what you witnessed, but after it was in your body. So I'm kind of curious how life for you was as a father. But before I do that, I think an important thing is I would love to hear about your take on. I mean, and I'm sure. So I mean, there are a lot of people with misophonia who look back and they're like, "Oh, I don't remember anything bad. I don't remember anything that happened or whatever. This sounds like it just kind of came out of nowhere." Even me, who's been to kind of like an IFS kind of trauma informed therapy, it's hard for me. Because like you said, I'm not a super dramatic person. It's hard for me to like come up with memories, and I feel sometimes kind of like under the gun and forced to kind of like think of something. What helped you like find that memory, like um
I can't take any
loosen it up?
I can't take
Yeah.
any credit for that. I have to
Okay.
give it all to the therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, it didn't happen the first time. We did EMDR for months until one
Gotcha.
day.
Okay.
And I wish I could give you more detail because one of the reasons I agreed to come on your podcast is if there's anything I could do to help other people with this, because I know what it's like. I know people who thought, oh, he's just being dramatic or it can't be that bad, that they don't understand that it's painful. When you get triggered and you have misophonia, it's really painful. We were in a session. She somehow, and I wish I remembered more, and this was 5 or more years ago. I wish I remember what led up to it, but when it happened, it was as plain as day that the traumatic event that really shaped me over the past 60 years was my father hitting my mother with that 2x4. When it came out, I just intuitively knew that was it. And I feel bad because I listen to your podcast too. And I hear so many people talk about the symptoms and not have any idea how they got there. I see you.
Sorry, I'm nodding real hard because I'm trying to I'm trying to really bring this up where we're focusing too much on the post onset misophonia and the symptoms and not thinking about that.
Yeah.
There's an 800-pound gorilla that we're not looking at. It's that period before.
And maybe if this podcast gets more people to start looking into it, I think that would be wonderful. I can only tell you what worked for me was, again, the EMDR followed by the memory reconsolidation. Right. And I don't know if everyone can afford. I happen to be on Medicare, and they're pretty good about paying for these kind of things. I can just encourage you to sit with a professional and try to get to that triggering event. I feel for everybody that's out there, including you, that experiences this and just can't remember it. I lived 50 years of my life or more in that state, that I had this thing. I have no idea how I got here. Most people think I'm being too dramatic. Including this woman I was just dating. I think she looked at me like, why are you being so, sensitive to these things? They just don't get how really debilitating it is. But again, that was only half of the equation. Knowing the event helped me in no way deal with misophonia. It was the combination of knowing the event and memory reconsolidation to replace that horrible memory with one that's much more pleasant. And then finally shutting down that piece of memory and having the pleasant memories live in a really nice and encouraging place. In fact, I go to these events, like I go to this Bible study, which has a lot of potential for being triggering. And I have this picture on the note sitting in front of me, just in case I do get a trigger. I'm not going to, have fight or flight, but I just look at that picture and it's like, okay, we're good.
Yeah. Which picture is it? The picture that the AI picture that
the final picture, the one where we got rid of the cage.
Yeah.
And I'll send these to you, but it's basically the two visions, me and my mother and me talking in an open field with mountains in the background. I tried to pick the most calming, pleasant, and this actually came up during one of my sessions with my therapist, but then I just went to AI and had it draw it for me.
Yeah, fascinating. And just to go back, like thanks for like sharing the process. I think the lesson is one of the lessons is like it's an open-ended process. Like it was very insightful to hear from you that it didn't happen right away. It took a long time. It took months to get to that point. Too much. I think too often in our current therapy, our therapy modalities are very focused on short-term solutions, and so we don't really, and insurance won't pay for long-term open-ended exploration. And I think that's what we need, because our bodies are designed for an 8-session beginning and end. And so I think that's a huge insight that we need to bring back, because we've lost that over the last 40 years.
Also, going back to the relationship, that was so painful for me that I made a commitment to myself that I need to learn something from this. I need, no matter what it takes, I need to learn something from this so I don't repeat this mistake again. And both times with the EMDR months and this past one, I started seeing her, my therapist, in April. And this just happened in September, this past September. So it took, now, to be fair, we didn't learn about the memory reconsolidation probably till, I would say, I forget when your podcast was, but I think it was in the July time frame.
July, yeah.
Yeah, that's when I first learned about it and told my therapist. And it took her a month. It took her from that point till probably the beginning of September. And then it took her, to give her credit, many sessions before we got it right. And I knew we got it right, because as soon as she did it, the time where it had the maximum effect, I felt this sense of relief, and all I saw was this blank sheet of paper, like it's time, new life, time to start over again. And I had the exact same experience the second time we did it with the second memory.
Wow. Your cat agrees. Your cat's applauding you. Amazing. That's amazing. I'm so happy for you. Do you want to talk I guess about your family, your kids? Yeah. Kind of what was that like when you
So obviously I'm divorced. Growing up, we had a good life. I've always been very close to my kids. My ex regrettably does not have a relationship with them. I'm not going to get into that here, but because of that, pretty much I've been like a single parent for a long time for both of them. They've both been understanding, but they also both kind of, I'll give you an example. We went to a funeral a couple of years ago, obviously before I made this breakthrough. And they said, "All right, Dad, where do you have to sit?" Because, you think about these things. And where are you going to sit? Where there's the least amount of chance that you're going to get triggered, right? So it always have to be at the back, at the end, on the side. And so they were understanding, but I don't think they really realized how debilitating it can be. But they've been very supportive throughout this whole thing. And like I said, this is so new, and I'm still kind of pinching myself, and I mean, yesterday at church when I had no reaction at all, I really convinced myself when I walked out that yeah, this is real. This is different. This
Mm-hmm.
is so
Mm-hmm.
different. So I do need to tell them. Hopefully, before when does this go live?
Oh, probably this later this month. Yeah, later this
Okay,
month.
so I have
Yeah.
some time to tell them. I don't want
Yeah.
them to learn through this.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have a great relationship. I have a son and a daughter. My son has two kids. So I have two grandchildren, and they're the best thing that ever happened to me.
Mm-hmm. 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 Well, no, that's great that at least they're aware and they think about you when you're when you're in situations and
Oh, they
asking asking how things work out. And yeah, I'm sure they're going to be happy to hear the breakthroughs that you've made. Um, do you want to? I guess now switching, like like to jump around, going back to, obviously we talked about the big memory growing up. What I mean was I guess what else was I would like to hear what else was going on. Was there? I mean, was it? I don't want to say typical, but was there a lot of domestic disturbance at home? Was that the kind of like um, uh, basically turbulence that was happening that you were talking about?
Yeah, there was a lot of turbulence, and I'm sure
Yeah,
there's some memories that um,
are
I,
still kind of hidden. Yeah,
that are still hidden. But I
yeah,
don't think anything at the scale of the 2x4 incident. But
yeah.
in fact, my brother told me about one incident he had where he caught my parents fighting in front of all his friends, and how embarrassing that was.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm-hmm,
but there were many. It was dysfunctional. My Just to give a little background, my father grew up in Sicily, and when he was 3 years old, his father committed suicide, and
mm-hmm,
mother
mm-hmm.
never remarried, and so he had some issues where he reacted to a lot of situations like a 3-year-old would. He'd have temper
Mm-hmm.
tantrums, he'd have separation anxiety, all you know.
Yep.
So that stuff would come out all the time. He'd start screaming at my mother or screaming at anybody who was walking by, and um, it was it was hard for me to have normal relationships after that because my notion of a relationship is this crazy person arguing and screaming at everybody. My mother died when I was 18 years old, so I was very young.
Ah, okay.
That was tough on me too, but I'm sure all these horrible things that happened to her, you know, didn't help. But yeah, dysfunctional is the only word I can think of to describe my growing up.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you. Well, I mean, I was gonna ask like, what was your parents' childhoods like? And I think you painted um, uh, tough picture right there, and that makes a lot of sense. A lot of the times there's um, the dysfunction doesn't just start automatically. Usually kind of comes from somewhere. Usually there's a cycle that is being repeated.
So again, my brother's a therapist, and his theory is that my father stopped growing emotionally at 3 when his father committed suicide. By the way, his father had some kind of disease that he thought, like my grandfather thought, was incurable. That's why he shot himself. Um, but my father never recovered from that. And, he'd go through like some times where he just seemed normal, but other times he was anything but normal. Uh, and, for me, it all culminated in that one event.
Mm-hmm,
By the way, neither one of them knew I was standing there. I don't think
mm-hmm.
that 2x4 incident would have happened if either one of them looked and saw me standing there. And I'm the only one that saw it. And my brother and sister grew up in that same environment. Neither of them has misophonia. The only thing that was different was that event. And we talked about this 1,000 times, and we all agree that if you're looking for a traumatic event that could trigger something else, that was it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. Okay. And then I guess growing. Well, that was around 10. Like, how about did friends at school trigger you? You mentioned something about a lecture hall, obviously. But yeah, what was life like? Like, how did you start to experience misophonia outside the home?
Um, it came and it went. I spent 3 years in
Mm,
the Army, and in the first 6 months of that, you're in basic training, and you're in a barrack with 50 guys sleeping like feet from each other,
yeah,
snoring. I don't remember it affecting me at all because, well, I was afraid the drill sergeant would come and kill me or something. It was other motivations, but
yeah,
I remember always being sensitive to slurping, burping kind of things, and dealing with it mostly by just avoiding the situation. It wasn't until, and as long as I could avoid it, I felt like, okay, this isn't so bad. I can deal with it. It was in the cases where, like, sitting in that classroom with the girl snapping behind me, where you can't do anything, sitting on
right,
an airplane with the person next to you making some annoying sound. Then I remember those. I remember a lot of those. And thank God for noise canceling headphones, right? That I would put them um, on planes. I remember being in working in a cubicle environment, headphones. I mean, there's no way I could sit there. Even just the sound of typing next to me, I just couldn't handle that. But I also noticed the more stress I had in my life, the more sensitive I
yep,
became. Like, that SUDS rating would have definitely gone up being stressed. I remember when my dad passed away, I was so sensitive, I couldn't even go to work. I just told my boss, every single sound is triggering me. And so I spent like a week at home just, trying to get over that. And then I'd go back to my normal level of sensitivity. So for the most of my part, most of my life, whenever I got triggered, I would just find a place. I could always sit in a corner. People always knew, like, when they were seating assignments made, oh yeah, Michael needs to be in the corner. They
mm,
just understood. They didn't really know why, but they understood. And people were kind to me that way, that they knew that there was some issue. They didn't know what it was. I didn't even know what it was till my sister told me a few years ago. Um, so yeah, I don't remember a lot of specific things. I do remember
yeah,
with the woman I was dating, there were some very specific times when I was triggered. One time we were at this pickleball event, and people started screaming. I remember like this and not even thinking about why I was doing it. And she noticed. There was some other times where she had some friends talking loud or tapping a pen, and I would react. Most of the time, what I would do is remove myself from the situation. I'd go for a walk outside. Or one time when that woman was tapping the pen, I asked her nicely if she could stop tapping the pen. But I think those things, got to her after a while. That she thought that, this wasn't normal, and it, like I said, it ended the relationship, unfortunately.
yeah, yeah. How was your how was your relationship with your dad, as after your mom passed away and everything?
Um, it was how do I say this? I guess as normal as I could be
Mm,
under the circumstances.
mm,
He had separation anxiety, like I said, and
yeah.
when I went into the Army, he was living in the same house where I grew up. And when I got out, he wanted me to move back in. And here I was 23 years old, lived all over the world, very independent. Like, when you're in the Army, you got to do everything yourself. Your laundry. I learned how to, be very independent. The last thing I wanted to do was go live. He remarried. I didn't want to live in that house. And I remember him. I said to him, "Look, I need to move," and he said, "If you move, I'm going to die." So I said, "Oh wow."
He said that?
He said,
Wow.
"Use
Okay.
those words." So I ended
Mm-hmm.
up building a house right next to his, and I got married, and it got real contentious because he would walk into the house, and here's my newlywed wife, and he would just be standing there in the middle of the house, and I had a big argument with him over that he couldn't do that kind of thing. That led to this really intense situation where we were sitting in front of the house in a snowstorm. I was trying to shovel. He grabbed a shovel from me and tried to hit me with it. Actually nicked my ear. My ear started bleeding. My wife calls the police. The police said, "You want to press charges?" And I said, "No, because I don't want my father going to jail." But that led to me saying, "That's it. I'm putting the house on the market and moving." Sure enough, as soon as I did that, he died. If you move, I die. Yeah, it actually happened.
Wow. Okay. That's heavy. Yeah. A lot of symbolism there with the ear, but I won't won't belabor
I
that
didn't even
point.
thought of that, but yeah,
Yeah.
the ear comes back. Yeah.
Um, wow, fascinating. I mean, yeah. I mean, sorry to hear that. That's wow. And your now ex-wife. What did she think about the misophonia? I know you don't want to get into what happened to that relationship, but I'm just kind
Um,
of curious if she was kind
no,
of
Miss Tony had nothing to do with that
yeah.
relationship. Um, I I don't remember, and I don't know if this is intentional or not. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I told you these certain situations, that specific situation that just happened with this woman I was dating.
Mm-hmm.
We called each other life partners. We weren't married, but we dated for a couple of years. I don't remember those kind of situations with her, although I'm
Yeah.
sure they happened, and I'm sure the way I dealt with it was just to remove myself from the situation. But there were other issues there that led to the divorce. And I her siblings both passed away recently, and I went to both
Mm-hmm.
funerals, and so
Mm-hmm.
we have kind of a civil relationship.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, yeah. Wow. Okay. And so, are you? Now that you've had, it's been kind of recent that you've, felt some freedom from misophonia. Are you doing anything day to day? Any kind of daily practice to kind of like, make sure make sure that this stays? I'm kind of curious. Or is it the therapy session? Then you come out and you have that blank slate feeling.
So I'm still going to therapy.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things Sarah suggested is I work on that initial SUDS number, that because my body is so used to reacting to these triggers, I have this anxiety that triggers are going to bother me. So she said that would be a good thing for me to work on. So I'm going to work on that with her. Um, Other than that, I mean, I'm retired, so like I get involved with different groups. Like right now, I'm leading a divorce recovery group. So I try to do things to kind of be normal. And by the way,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that would have been a real issue, because during these groups, people cry, and when they cry, they're sniffling. Sniffling was absolutely a trigger for me.
Yeah.
So being able to sit in that class and hear people sniffle and not react to it it's been very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's kind of the gift that keeps on giving is once you've kind of healed yourself, you can help heal others
Yeah,
because you can be there.
that's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
Um, Fascinating. And so, have you met other people with misophonia, especially now that that it's had a name? Have you been able to kind of talk to people in real
Um,
life?
well, virtually, I've met a lot through your podcast.
Yeah.
In real life, I've known some people who say they have sensitivity to sounds, and
Hmm.
I'm sure you're familiar with the So Quiet group.
Yeah. 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 Of course.
They
Yeah.
have these little like business cards
Yeah.
you can pass out that say, I have reaction to sounds, and that you can hand people. And I've given a few of those out to people because, they explained to me, I've got this real sensitivity. I don't know what to do with it. I said, here's a card, check it out. I told them tell them about your podcast too.
Hmm.
But very few, very few. I mean, most of the people with misophonia I'm aware of, I've learned through your podcast.
Yeah. Fascinating. Yeah. Well, I mean, Michael, we're getting Yeah, getting close to an hour here has already been very very heavy, and I think impactful. I think a lot of people are going to hear this and kind of hopefully change the way they think about misophonia and themselves and their backgrounds. And so I think hopefully, I hope all these episodes cause a lot of self-reflection, and the understanding that this is not a overnight solution,
No,
that it's a
no,
process.
I encourage everybody to go back and listen to episode 218 with Sarah Barrick. Sarah interviewed me, and she's got her own demystifying misophonia work that she's doing.
And book that came out. Yeah.
Book, yeah. Fascinating person. I encourage everybody, follow Sarah. Just type in memory reconsolidation on YouTube, and all these experts will show up, including Sarah did give me the name of a guy Bruce Ecker.
Bruce Eckert, yeah.
And then there's coherence therapy she mentioned. Just watching those really encouraged me, because then I thought, yeah, there is something I can do besides the gummies. The gummies, like I said, they kind of work, but I couldn't drive anywhere. I was impaired. But all it was doing was kind of like a Band-Aid. It didn't really help as much as the memory reconsolidation. So definitely encourage people that, if you need to do some work, EMDR is an amazing tool to try to recover the trauma. EMDR is all about trauma. I had PTSD when I had that car accident, and it cured me of it. I mean, it took a while. It took a few months, but it cured me of it. And that's why when my brother said go back, I was more than willing to. But you got to stick to it, and got to be serious about wanting to, have a positive change. This recent breakup, if that hadn't happened, this wouldn't have happened for me. So as painful as that was, it led me to this. And, hopefully I won't have to go through that again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, one thing leads to another. I mean, that painful thing, you decided to turn it into a lesson, or use it as motivation to solve, well, you don't know it's going to solve misophonia, to actually explore it and fix it. And that in turn is helping you help others by leading these groups. And so I think there are many ripple effects, and I think in many ways misophonia is kind of a signal, like it was when you were a child. It was a signal to something that you need to be vigilant about, and that's all our bodies can do at that age, because we don't have the words or the understanding to make sense of what's going around. But you need to protect yourself somehow, and if misophonia develops as a way to signal that.
That's what my body was doing. Taking that memory, which is too awful to remember, and storing it in a place where I wouldn't have to remember it. But in the process of doing that, turned everything my father was doing into a trigger, which affected me the rest of my life until a few weeks ago.
Wow. Amazing. Well, yeah, Michael, thanks for coming on and sharing this story. I think hopefully it's gonna inspire a lot of people. So I
hope so, Adil, and I commend you for your work. And like I said, if it wasn't for meeting Sarah in one of your podcasts, I never would have gotten here. So I really thank you for that.
Thank you again, Michael. I really appreciate this powerful conversation, and I know it's gonna help a lot of people. If you like this episode, don't forget to leave a quick review, or just hit the 5 stars wherever you listen to this podcast. You can hit me up by email at hello@misophoniapodcast.com, or go to the website, misophoniapodcast.com. It's even easier just to send a message on Instagram at Misophonia Podcast. You can follow there, or Facebook, or on Twitter. It's Misophonia Show. The music, as always, is by Moby. And until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.